What's up, everybody? Ian here with Redline. I work at redlinestands.com, and we sell a lot of 2- and 4-post car lifts. And naturally, as such, we get people that call us up every day. They're interested in getting a car lift. They know they want a car lift, but they haven't necessarily had these really important epiphanies yet about which one is right for them. You know, you've got these really common 2 types of lifts. You've got a 2-post, which is what I have here at home, and then you've got a 4-post. And, you know, it's not necessarily about which one is best. It's about which one is best for you. And there's some things that you guys need to consider if you're interested in a car lift, so you know which one is going to be the right choice for you. If you'll give me just a couple minutes of your time, hopefully I can clear it up a bit. So let's first talk about the biggest differences between a 2- and a 4-post car lift. And I know what you're thinking I'm going to say. One has 2 posts, the other has 4 posts. I think that much is pretty much obvious. But what you might not necessarily realize if you're in the market for one of these things is at the end of the day, it all comes down to what are you going to use the lift for. In my case, here at home, I do a lot of mechanical work on my own cars at home. And as a result, I decided to go with a 2-post. And the reason that I did that is because this car is not sitting on its wheels and tires right now. The arms go right up underneath the frame, just like you see right there, and I can walk up to this car, I can pull the wheels off of it, I can do a brake job on it, I can start working on suspension components, everything that you can think of, all underneath this entire car is just totally available to me to be able to do whatever kind of mechanical work that I want, because I chose a 2-post lift. So just humor me for a second here. Suppose that I had bought a 4-post lift for my shop here at home instead of a 2-post. In such a case, that car would be sitting on a set of runways. So I could not walk right up to the tires and wheels, pull those off, put a new tie rod end on it, do a brake job, adjust the ride height. I couldn't do any of that stuff because the car would be sitting on its own wheels and tires just up off the ground on the runways. Unless you got a set of bridge jacks. If you're wanting to get a 4-post lift and you're thinking you want to be able to do some mechanic style work on your car on that 4-post lift, you're gonna need one of these things. This is a bridge jack. It goes in between the runways of the 4-post lift and it slides forward and rearward, kind of like on a rail system. And most folks will get one of these for the front, one of these for the rear, and you just use them like you see here to pick the car up off of the runways. That way the tires and wheels are left dangling. The kicker to this is, if you're going to do that, you're going to be spending a couple $1,000 extra. You're going to need at least 1, if not 2 of those things, and they're not cheap. One of the other differences between the 2 is that a 4-post is a much, much larger lift. You've got 4 posts instead of 2, and then these massive runways that connect them. So unless you've got a great big shop with lots of room, you probably need to kind of space budget for the fact that the 4-post takes up a lot more real estate in your shop. Let's take a second and talk about ceiling height. If you've got a low ceiling height, you know, in your garage at home, an 8-foot ceiling, you may be just stuck with a 4-post lift. Most 4-post lifts are only about 7 feet tall. So if you're limited on ceiling height, you may have to go with a 4-post. However, with a 2-post, these things are available in 2 different types. You have a floor plate model shown here, and then a clear floor model, which is what I have behind me. The floor plate model is made for a lower ceiling height. Most of those that we offer can fit inside of a 10-foot ceiling. However, a clear floor style, which is what I use here at home, as you can see, is very tall. You're going to need at least 12 feet of ceiling height for a clear floor 2-post lift. Let's take a second and talk about the difference in the concrete requirements of a 2 versus a 4-post lift. In the end of this video, I'm going to put a link to this video right here where we talk about concrete requirements for a 2-post in much greater detail. But the short of it is this. If you're looking at a 2 versus a 4-post, you kind of need to know that 2-posts tend to require much more out of the concrete than 4-posts. 4-posts generally get broken up into like 2 different categories, the small ones and the big ones. The smaller ones, like your 8,000-pound 4-posts, most of those manufacturers do not require that those things are mounted to the concrete at all, whereas your bigger 4-posts, like your 12Ks and things like that, have to be secured and anchored to the concrete. So just be aware that if you think you've got concrete that's not really quite thick enough and strong enough for a 2-post, maybe it's not reinforced with steel, you just don't know. Maybe you do need to go with a 4-post lift because those things don't necessarily even have to be anchored to the concrete for some of the smaller ones, and you can get away with that and not worry about whether or not your concrete is sufficient. However, when we're talking about whether or not your concrete is sufficient for a 2-post lift, all of a sudden everything changes. The concrete here at my shop at home is extra strong, extra thick, and extra reinforced. If we come down here and we have a look, you can see all of those anchors where it's anchored to the concrete. These things have to be anchored to the concrete. So the concrete requirements and all of that stuff for a 2-post is terribly important. If you don't know what your thickness is and your compression strength and how it was reinforced and all of that stuff, you might ought to stick with a 4-post. There's one other thing that I need you to understand about this. It's way easier to get your vehicle on and off of a 4-post lift than it is a 2-post. With a 4-post, you just drive the car onto the lift, put it in park, hop out, hit the button, goes up and down. It's just easy as it can possibly be. However, with a 2-post, all of that changes. You kind of need to understand that if you decide to go with one of these things, for the rest of your days, you're going to be getting down on your knees 4 times and positioning the arms where they go under the vehicle and then adjusting the feet to get them in the right spot. You're going to do that 4 times every time. In terms of ease of use, it really doesn't stop there. 4-posts are also a lot more user-friendly in that you're not worried about where am I lifting from. Here with a 2-post, you've got to, find yourself wondering, okay, is this a structurally sufficient spot that I can lift from with a 2-post? And then you have to worry, well, do I have too much of the car loaded out that way so it's not even enough on the lift? Well, what about if I completely remove the entire rear suspension system out of the car? Am I removing so much weight out of it that all of a sudden it's going to flop over forward? We have a video about that stuff. You should watch that. A lot of good information there. So when you're using a 4-post lift, you don't really have to worry about that. You don't care whether the car is too far forward, too far rearward, whether you're picking up from a structurally sufficient spot. None of that matters, but it's everything on a 2-post. You need to consider that when you're trying to figure out which lift is right for you. Now, one area where 4-post lifts really win over 2-post lifts is vehicle storage. There's absolutely nothing stopping me from parking my Z06 Corvette underneath my 67 Nova here. The problem that you run into is that right there at the end of my thumb. You see that? That's the drippage on the floor from my power steering pump. I've got a power steering leak on the Nova that I've yet to solve. This is where 4-posts really win, and that if you buy like a 8,000-pound 4-post parking lift from us, it's probably going to come with 3 of these things. These are drip trays. You just put them right in between the runways like you see in this shot right here, and they catch any drippage off of the engine, transmission, differential, whatever it may be, so that nothing coming off of that upper vehicle lands on the lower vehicle. This is where 4-posts win over 2-posts every time. So there's one other area where a 4-post lift kind of wins over a 2-post. Earlier we talked about how some of your smaller 4-post lifts like the 8K parking lifts don't have to be anchored to the concrete. And again, check the requirements for whatever particular lift that you're looking at. Don't just take my word for it. Make sure that that specific lift you are interested in says it does not have to be anchored to the concrete. A lot of the lifts out there today come with caster kits where you can just secure the caster kit right to all 4 corners of the 4-post parking lift and then move the thing around the shop to where it's then portable. My 2-post is obviously anchored in one location and I could never ever move it. So in that regard, a 4-post does have that over a 2-post. One other quick thing I'll add, those of you guys out there who have very, very low sports cars, low riders, things of that nature, maybe you've got yourself a Z06 that's a lowered Z06. It's even lower than mine. You need to consider whether or not the 2-post lift that you're looking at has a low pad height so that pad right there will go so low to the ground and the thickness of that arm is so thin that it will actually get underneath that low sports car. You need to watch out for that. So hopefully at this point I've given you some good information about the differences between 2 and 4-post lifts. It's not really about which one is best. It's about which one is best for you. I'm going to put a link down below in the description to our website where you can find all of the 2 and 4-post lifts that we sell. And finally, as a favor to me, I would ask if you don't mind, down below, turn on notifications, click subscribe, all of that good stuff, and follow our YouTube channel. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope I helped you today. Y'all have a great one. Take care.